We are working here on a national holiday.
No, aspetta Romolo,
No,
aspetta,
non c'è.
perché non è partita la registrazione.
Okay.
Ok, partita.
Adesso, bene. Okay, here we are again. Good morning. We are here on a national holiday. If you hear an interruption with a lot of noise in the background, it's because we have they planned a flyover of some important jets here in Rome, and that might disrupt the recording a little bit. We want to talk today about the introductory seminar that we have scheduled for the fall semester. It is a 2-week-long exercise, basically a design charrette, which is linked to a competition for a master's program. The master's program has to do with architecture for archaeology, and our charrette will be based on Hadrian's Villa. There'll be a design project there that Francesco Leoni, the other professor involved here this morning, will tell you something about. And we, as Pantheon Institute, will participate from the first day of the design charrette, which will be, I think, the 23rd of August until the 4th of September. That's roughly a 2-week period when we will have lectures and then mostly design operations, which we will conduct in our studio here in Palazzo Dore Pamphili in Rome. Other students from many different universities, in fact, from all over the world, will be participating in the same design charrette. And we will compare notes at various times during the 2 weeks, and especially at the end with our final presentations. And we have done this now for, I think we're on our 19th year. This was started almost 20 years ago. And we will essentially use this introduction to the key design problems of working in a place like Rome and Italy, and any place with a substantial tradition of architecture and cultural activity over many years. All of that will be condensed into what basically amounts to a baptism by fire. We've sort of full immersion for the first 2 weeks. You'll be working long hours and with all the issues that will probably carry you through the entire semester. In any case, we will get some more details from Professor Leoni in just a few minutes. And if you have any questions, for those of you who are not connected directly right now, you can email me. You all have my email. Just to refresh you, the Penn State email is rgm6@psu.edu, and I'll be happy to answer your questions between now and when this all takes further shape and when we actually get started in on the 23rd of August. So without any further introduction, I should mention that Professor David Sabatello is also online. You may
well, thank you so much. Very generous of you.
David will be coordinating the design section of the Pantheon Institute semester. And for all of you students who don't know us yet, those of you from University of Tennessee in Knoxville, UMass, and well, those of you from Penn State, of course, but you probably know us already from hearsay and all the terrible gossip you get from other students. But we'll be here and we'll be running this thing for you. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask between now and when you arrive. With that, I will turn it over to Francesco. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Romolo. It's so good to see you again. Everybody is healthy, and apart from the fact there's a little lack of students participating in this tutoring this morning, I guess that most of them will have a look to the recording we are taking at the moment. So let me straight start. I'll share the screen. Schermo, okay. Just let me know if you can see my PDF. Can you tell me? Can you see it?
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah, why we are here.
That's great. Okay, so this morning I'm going to get into the real topics of the Premio Piranesi duties, what you are going to do and why you are going to do during those 2 weeks at the end of August and beginning of September. Basically, there are questions about methodologies and also about logistics. But overall, the explanation of the approach we want to take and the reason why we decided to start all these things. So basically, why are we here? Why every year we organize this workshop competition, and why do you participate in so many in Piranesi Prix de Rome? And I say so many because apart those 2 years that were characterized by COVID, we usually have approximately a number of 150, 170 students each year taking part in Premio Piranesi. So evidently this shows a big interest in what we do. And the answer, because of that, are different. Sorry for my voice, but I hope that it will improve soon. First of all, because the issue you begin to know in these days are very important for your future and will be a privileged branch that we can say of an elite, and will always be more and more strategic in the cultural policies of the countries that hold a great archaeological and cultural heritage. This subject is usually called architecture for archaeology. I want to be clear about that. We are not going to become archaeologists. We are architects and we teach how to design architecture. The main goal is to learn from the past, basically understanding which the reasons that were behind the project of the past led to the architecture of the classical age. Basically, we want to, using someone else's word, we want to stand on the shoulder of the giants, and in this way understand exactly the fundamentals of the discipline, to learn how to behave and how to design in the nowadays. Basically, it is an unfolding. This set of knowledge correlated with 3 disciplines: architecture, archaeology, and museography, where the last forms the hinge of the first 2. Basically, there were this strange dialogue between archaeologists and architects that stopped a kind of 200 years ago because of different point of views, and also because of different goals and achievement to be reached. Our goal is to recreate this dialogue to help both the archaeologists, but mostly us as architects, because of our formation, helping the researchers also to understand better what's going on in the archaeological areas. This subject basically takes body and the shape between the 2nd and the 3rd decades of the 19th century, almost simultaneously in Rome and Athens, and later, throughout the 2nd half of the century, still in Rome and France. First, with the consolidation of the Colosseum and the reconstruction of the Arc of Titus in Rome, and then with the restoration program of the Acropolis in Athens, downstream of the independence of Greece. We can remember the plan from Leo von Klenze for Athens that has been designed between 1830 and 1834. And then with systematic studies, excavation, and experimentation of French pensionnaire of Villa Medici in Rome, mostly between the 1860 and 1910. I'm going to explain this better with the next slide, so don't get scared if you are a bit lost in my words. Mostly, we are going to design architecture for archaeology, not just related to archaeology in itself, as I told you, but also to start that process of valorization and musealization that is a great branch that can open you great jobs possibilities, and most of all if you are in countries that have a lot to show and a lot to valorize, also to improve the cultural heritage offer for the visitors and the tourists. Basically, the intervention on the ruins and monuments of antiquity aimed at the recovery and rehabilitation of themselves is a physiological thing in the history of cities and architectures. It always existed and has also determined, in particular circumstances, important transformation of existing buildings. We can say, in essence, that the history of transformation of the buildings coincides with the history of architecture. You have to consider that in a larger way, also taking in account the consumption of soil that mostly in Europe nowadays is mostly forbidden. I mean, Europe is a very small area with a great number of inhabitants, and even the the environment's problems and the energy consumption problem and all those things that come with the new green tendencies that we are looking forward forced us in that direction, that taking account the fact that it's better to restore and rebuild and to valorize what is already existing instead of building new buildings, and so without the consumption of soil. There are four main ideas behind this kind of approach, and all of them are brought by the modernity. In particular way, we can tell that the first idea is the one that has to do with the continuity and discontinuity of the ancient ruins and the contemporary project. In fact, on the one hand, the critical issue of continuity discontinuity between all the new and, as a corollary, the need to introduce the concept of diversity in terms of shape, materials, and so on, of the new intervention compared to the ancient, and the related foregoing from their unity of style and from the classical completeness as the final result. So basically, the point here that most of the charts of restoration had to do in the past starts from the idea that the new intervention on the ruins, on the archaeology, should be recognizable by the visitor, by the people looking at them, and this is a very strange idea if compared to what have been done during the other centuries. In fact, until 200 years ago, this kind of differentiation didn't used to exist. The most important thing is the final image of the idea we are going to propose with this restoration, and not the importance of making the difference between new and the old so evident and so striking. The second point is the fact of the process of museum display, so intervening on the ancient ruins with a process of musealization. In fact, this is very important, most of all, to justify what we are doing and to valorize what we have to deal with. So intervention does not aim at reintegrating the existing function or another type of them, but turned to the only goal of the show, of the exhibition, and make the make the monument and its layer visible and understandable. The third point is the one about the reversibility. Reversibility understood in principle as ideological request aimed to protect the original artifact, and later in the sense of intended instead as a regressive and real terror of error. So I'm not going to judge that in a very deep way, but the point is that any kind of intervention you're going to produce, insisting on the archaeological areas, should be reversible. This meant in the way that once you want to remove your new intervention, the situation of the archaeology can get back to the exact state it was before the architectonic intervention. Last one, finally, is the critical relationship between old and new as a key element in the interpretation that the Western societies are given in terms of plan for an historical identity. Since the end of the 18th century and gradually more and more intensively until today, this relationship, by a level eminently cultural, shifts on the level of cultural politics. So basically, each government, each society gives himself some policies that define his historical identity. And the way we behave towards the ruins and the past is one of the most important of them. So architects have a great role in these regards. Basically, the beginning of this story started with the earthquake of 1805, which puts the Colosseum in a serious static crisis. Pope Pius VII Chiaramonti decides intervention that should have meant the Colosseum. The first of these was made by Raffaele Stern, who built the south spur, intervening directly on the unsafe structure and in advanced on the unsafe structure that was in an advanced state of static crisis. The principle is to incorporate the arches inside a mighty continuous brick masonry. The result of the merger intervention is surprisingly artistic, characterized by the so-called still image of the instant of the collapse. Let me show you what I mean. Those are some images of the Colosseum during the state of abandonment after the Middle Age. And here you can see the actual state of the Colosseum and the intervention of the Raffaele Stern. And here you can clearly see and appreciate this artistic idea of freezing the collapsing of the arch of the Colosseum in the exact moment in which this collapse should have occurred. The Raffaele Stern intervention, in fact, took care in stopping this collapse process by his restoration and showing the people and the visitors how and what it could have happened to the Colosseum without his intervention. Here we have the first clear example of how the intervention on the ruins could be merged with contemporary architecture. Obviously, we are talking of contemporary architecture of the beginning of the 19th century. Here you can have other images of that. And this is the other side of the Colosseum. Other images of this amazing building. And as I told you, the intervention were more than one. In fact, we can talk about mostly three interventions. The second one is the one by Giuseppe Valadier, who worked for the first time in the history of architecture with a reconstructive project motivated by static consolidation, but essentially aimed at the readability of the complex structural section of the Colosseum itself. The third intervention, extremely refined, takes place in the mid-19th century by Gaspare Salvi, who places himself in continuity with the road opened by Valadier. So the idea of a reconstructive project. And who intends to close the inner ring of the amphitheater, highlighting the longitudinal section and the long vaults walking. Here you can see from the drawing how the Colosseum used to appear in the top left image, and underneath you can see the reconstructive part. So this static and structural intervention is shaped in the idea of a shape reconstructive intervention itself. So the new spur, differently from the one we saw in the beginning, the one from stair, in this case used to imitate what the Colosseum used to look like in the ancient years. These images, I guess, are speaking very clearly. Here you can have a look from a closer image in which you can appreciate how the masonry, the brick masonry, imitate completely the original stone refinement of the Colosseum. So people can still appreciate the differences between the original and the new intervention, but at the same time can have an idea of the overall original volumes without changing its shape. Here you can have other look of the intervention. This is the third one. This is the second intervention, the one from from Valadier, in which, for example, the arches were very similar to the original one. You can see the arches on the right, they are the new one, and the arches on the left, they are the original ones. And here, instead, you can see the last intervention, the one by Salvi, in which the arches were treated in a different way. The story continues with the events linked to the reconstruction of the Acropolis of Athens, which is still in progress today, actually. They started in 1832, when an impressive work on the sacred rocks over there, starting from the demolition of the residential building fabric that had completely occupied it, passing through the study of excavation of the so-called Persian flood that highlighted the phases construction prior the 480 Annus Domini. No, sorry, AD is wrong. Before Christ, anyway, the 480 before Christ, up to the reconstruction for the by the anastylosis of Nicolaus Balanos, that in fact have given the image of the current Acropolis. All these processes were taken and were led by that methodology that is so-called anastylosis. It is a particular type of restoration understood as a partial reconstruction, or more rarely total reconstruction, of a building by way of recomposing its architectural elements that have been dismembered. Then you can have a look to the etymology of this idea, but the point is pretty clear. So rebuilding all those missing parts by using the rest of those missing parts that can be found straight on the archaeological areas, and fill the gap that can't be found any longer with new elements that just complete the restoration intervention. Here you can see how the Acropolis of Athens used to look like before those restoration intervention. This is an engraving of the 18th century. You can have a look that basically the Acropolis became a sort of a burrow in the middle of the Parthenon. You could have find a mosque and a church before, and the rest were places occupied by houses. And this is a very famous painting by Leo von Klenze in wondering how the Acropolis of Athens could have looked like in the Golden Age. And those are the drawings depicting exactly a reconstruction of what the Parthenon would have looked like during his years of building. Apart from the quality of those drawings, it's important to see how the Parthenon used to look like before the Balanos intervention taken in the early 20th century. Actually, if you go nowadays to visit the Acropolis of Athens, you would have a completely different view of the Parthenon and all the entire Acropolis. Those are amazing photographs taken in ancient times that shows us how different the situation is now. Most of the long sides of the Parthenon were completely dismembered, and you can see the biggest part of the columns laid just around the Parthenon with those ruins collapsed all over. This picture instead shows how the archaeologists started to recollect each piece collapsed to start an ideological reconstruction of the Parthenon. And those are the first intervention. This is the view of the northern peristasis, already started with his anastylosis process. And so you can easily appreciate which parts were original and which one were added to fill the gaps. Here you can start in appreciating both the peristasis with the reconstruction of the internal naos. Actually, if you remember the first photographs, you can remember that all the naos were missing. And those are pictures of what you could have seen until 25 years ago. I say 25 years ago because nowadays new restoration are going on, substituting some elements that were corrupted, and also going in the direction of completing the Parthenon to give the visitors a complete idea of how the Parthenon would have looked like in the beginning. This is mostly what you can appreciate to bringing back the Parthenon to its unitary shape. Actually, if you go there nowadays, it's not exactly that way because it's a continuing building site without stopping since 20 years, and it's going to last other 20 years in the future to finish the final restoration. And this brings me, this idea of the anastylosis, to another of the topics I introduced you before, that is the topic of reversibility. In fact, with the reversible intervention, we mean those architectural realizations whose constructive technique allows the restoration of the site before opera in case of functional disposal or planned obsolescence. It is a technical chronological modality developed by modernity based on the ideology of the continuous present, that is, on the opposition to the process of historization of the contemporaneity, completely different. In fact, this idea doesn't have anything that should be stratified. Everything can be eliminated. It is certainly something unnatural with respect to the history of architecture, and despite being an aberrant concept, it is nevertheless the magic word without which today a project is not approved by superintendencies. It should therefore be used judiciously and in a cultured way. So from these words, you can already appreciate or understand that the position is controversial. In fact, if on one side you can consider the recognizability of the contemporary intervention on the ruins as a value of the intervention in itself, for others, this idea of keeping the original image as something that should be kept and transmitted, another valuable point of view. And this idea of the reversibility goes into this direction. Restoring, assembly, disassembly, reassembling of the Athena Nike temple. This is another little temple that settles on the Acropolis, and I'm going to show you some images that maybe can show you something very clearly. This is the restored Athena Nike. No, sorry, this is not the restored, the completely restored, but we can say this is mostly the Athena Nike building before the restoration, settling over there on the Acropolis of Athens. You can see which an amazing position compared to the panorama. And here you can have a look, a couple of years later, of the situation without the temple of Athena Nike. In fact, as I told you, mostly because of techniques matters, the Athena Nike building, like most of the ancient Greek period, can be completely disassembled without corrupting the architecture in itself. Basically, we can consider the Greek architecture as a kind of ancient Lego. You know, all those bricks you can play with since young ages, the Denmark bricks in plastic, all colorful. And here you can see how the basement of the Athena Nike look like without the temple on itself. In fact, the archaeologists took away the entire temple to restore it somewhere else, and they brought back the temple after the restoration, the first restoration, because after this restoration, the Athena Nike had another restoration a few years ago. So you can easily understand how easy or how possible is to disassemble and to rebuild a building, mostly the ones from the classical ages, without corrupting itself and without changing the idea that what we are looking for is the original meaning of the building in itself. Okay. This is the first topic to introduce you to the idea of how to behave in classical situation. Now, before going on, sorry, I want to check if there are any question or something. No, nobody asked anything. Okay, so I can keep on going, and Control L. I can start in showing you the project sites and the issues of the Piranesi Prix de Rome. In the last years, we decided to deal with water architecture, so pavilions and intervention that has to do with water. This is because the Tiburtine territory is very rich since ancient times from a series of villas that belonged to the most influential and high-profile Romans that at the beginning were settled in those places, so all around the Tivoli, because of the landscape and also because of the presence of water. And Villa Adriana, the place where we are going to design in, is one of them. Obviously, Villa Adriana is the biggest, the largest, and the most important since it was the one of the emperor, but lots of other settlements can be found all around, having in a smaller scale the same peculiarities. All these villas, including the imperial ones, owe their strategic location to the presence of the Aniene River and, mostly, the 4 aqueducts that develop from it into a tunnel toward Rome. Here you can see in this amazing map from the 19th century the position of Tibur, the actual Tivoli, the main city, and different villas present on the territory. So the villa of Cassius, villa of Brutus, villa of Pallaste, lots of villa all over, and mostly Villa Adriana here in this place, pretty close to the Aniene River. Oops, sorry. This is a more recent image, a DVG basically. You can see Tivoli, you can see Villa Adriana, and you can see those 4 lines that represent the path of the aqueducts bringing water to Rome. This is Rome. And you can appreciate also the distance between Tivoli and Rome, a kind of 20 kilometers far. Villa Adriana is settled here on the southwestern side of Tivoli. The 4 aqueducts are Acqua Marcia, Acqua Claudia, Aniene Nuovo, and Aniene Vecchio. This is a closer look of the same image, and you can easily appreciate and understand how easy it was to bring water from those 4 aqueducts to Villa Adriana. This is another map enlarging the view of before and the paths of the different aqueducts and the connection to Villa Adriana. This is a satellite view, Tivoli, as an urban settlement. And this is the Villa Adriana area, the archaeological one, in which we are going to work in. Villa Adriana has always been a very important site since its discoveries, that is in the second half of the 16th century. And this map probably is the most important and famous representing the area. This is a map from 1752 by Giovan Battista Piranesi and finished by his son Francesco Piranesi. And it's very important map because it has been used by lots of archaeologists and architects, but it's not just looking after his duty of representation of the villa. It's also an artistic map in the quality of the representation and of the interpretation of the area. And nonetheless, is also very precise. In fact, from lots of comparing we had with other more recent and more precise maps, we could have found that this map that is 270 years old is not that different from the most technological ones. Here you can see the territory oriented in the same way of the map. This is Villa Adriana and some of these areas and pavilions. This is the actual entrance, and this is the main core of the archaeological site. And this is a kind of a bird's eye view of the area from the satellite, obviously from Google Earth, in which you can appreciate even better. Just to give you the sense of the dimension, this line that is a long wall is 200 meters long. Those are some images of the amazing area you are going to work with. The fashion and the quality of this situation is absolutely amazing and satisfying for the people visiting the place. And the connection of architecture, archaeology, water, environment, landscape, vegetation, and also literature melt together into a very peculiar and fascinating way. Here we can have a look of the Teatro Marittimo, one of his most famous pavilion. This is the pool of the Picile, and you can appreciate the relationship with the landscape. And those are some of the ruins left on the area, strictly connect even with the layer of the vegetation, and in this case of the olive oil trees. And if we are going to be lucky and we can have it a night visit of the villa, those are some of the images you can have walking through the ruins in that area. So, as I told you, the presence of water is very important for those archaeological areas, but also for your project during the weeks of the Premio Piranesi Award. And we can mean the water in two different ways. One is the acqua captiva, and another one is the acqua ex machina. No, sorry, one is the aqua naturans. Aqua captiva consists in that water that naturally, forcefully, the work of the humans forced into different direction and different function to design the elements of the villa, like fountains, like aqueducts, like pools, not naturally insisting on the area. While the second way in which we can appreciate water is the aqua naturans idea, that basically originates the romantic landscape on the archaeological naturalistic basis that connotates lots of the area around, because you have to consider that Villa Adriana is also close to Villa Gregoriana and Villa d'Este, other two interventions of the past years in which the water has a very strong impact. This is Villa d'Este, a settlement from the 16th century, which present an idea of aqua captiva. Here, in fact, the water were forced into pipelines to design this kind of situation with fake pools or with fountains, and lots of these elements characterized by the presence of the water, used even in scenographic way. Here you can have a look. We are going to visit those buildings when we are going to be there, and here you can have a look even to the visit of the area during the night. And all the scenographic setting made by the water are incredible and amazing, but all of them are clearly anthropized, are clearly evidently realized by man. On the other end, on the other side of the hill, we can have instead Villa Gregoriana, where the water instead was moved and forced in different directions, but keeping his formal expression as a water that look like being natural, look like being organic. So creating waterfalls and natural pools that define the area. Here you can see some of the images on the left side, one engraving, and underneath a photograph where the water flows down and falls down through the pits of the hill. And here the way it is collected and moved into caves and caverns that let the water flow in a very organic and natural way. So this view in particular shows you that despite this water has been moved from its original bed river, the look it keeps is still a natural one, a look that is designed with and from water in itself. So you can't clearly appreciate a stronger human intervention. But what that does mean to you, why we want you to design water pavilion or water architecture. First of all, because still learning from the classical age, we know that the places that used to present water, mostly the thermal bath in the Roman culture, were the places where arts could be displayed and shown. In fact, you can have a look to this picture that is a representation of Caracalla thermal bath, and you can clearly understand how this thermal bath that we can consider a kind of a spa of nowadays used to present lots of statues and of artistic pieces. Those are the thermal bath of Diocletiano, for example, and even in this picture you can appreciate the presence of pieces of art all over, spread in the different rooms of the thermal baths. This one is a reconstruction of that area that at the moment is occupied by the Coliseum. But you should know that before the presence of the Coliseum that has been built in the 80s after Christ, that place was occupied by a pool designed by Nerone for his Domus Aurea. And most of the statues that nowadays are displayed in a museum all over the world were found in thermal baths or in places where the water were public and the people could have appreciate and experience the quality of the water. For example, these statues of the Emperor Augustus was found inside the thermal bath, but also this Venere has been found in the Diocletiano thermal bath. This is another statue, and very rare since it's one of the statues in bronze. You probably know that usually the statues that were made in bronze were melted for military purposes. So the statues in bronze that arrived to nowadays are very few. And these statues representing a boxer was found in the Caracalla thermal baths. An amazing statues, actually. Look at the way they used to protect their hands with these strange gloves. And even this copy of the Discobolus has been found in the Caracalla thermal bath. So basically, the thermal bath and the area with water used to be in the classical age what we use now as a museum. I'm not going to talk too much about this quality, the quality of these statues. Obviously, you should know it. But even if we come to closer days and to a more understandable idea for you of what you're going to do, if we have a look to this building that I hope you all recognize it as the German pavilion for the International Exposition in Barcelona of 1929, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Here, the pavilion, in one of its pools, present a statue from Kolbe, because the water is probably the most suitable material to host pieces of art, because of his materiality, of his transparencies, and also his reflective properties. This is one of the most amazing and famous way to display a statue, standing on a pool and surrounded by walls of marbles. But if we want, we can even consider this famous and amazing house by Frank Lloyd Wright, the Kaufman house, basically, as a water pavilion. The reason of the design of this house is straight connected by the presence of water, and the shape of the house itself is driven by the presence of water. I don't know if you know this architecture. This is a plan of the Carlos Scarpa's Brion Cemetery. Even in this case, the presence of water of this graveyard is very important. In this case, even from a symbolic point of view, because, you know, the flowing of water has always been related to the circle of life and death. So being a graveyard here, the presence of water is symbolically very important, but also the fact that you can have pavilions floating over the water, like this one, gives to the area a particular importance and a particular significance. Try to guess this pavilion without the presence of water. Obviously, all the design would have changed. And here you can appreciate how those small channels, like the river of lives, brings water from point A to point B, like life and death circle. And even if we get to closer days, here we have a photographic setting that is organized inside the thermal bath in Vals, designed by Peter Zumthor, in which the presence of water in itself designed the space, and also became an incredible setting for this photographic session, organizing the space and being an incredibly scenographic design. Anyway, now I'm going to show you very briefly lots of pavilion that has been designed keeping in account the presence of water and using the presence of water as a building element, a building material, probably one of the most important one, because obviously water is a material like others, but because of its peculiarities, is a very strange and important material, because is fluid. It takes the shape of its container, because it reflects lights, because it's transparent. Here you can even appreciate an industry that has been realized using the presence of water as a surrounding element. This is an industry in the Pianura Padana. And obviously there are the classical example like this one that I guess all of you know, that is Fontana di Trevi, that we can consider as a fountain. That is obviously what it is, but it is also the facade of a building. So the Fontana the fountain, because of the presence of water, become also part of the building. So give the inputs for the architectural design. Obviously, everything should be reorganized and related to the nowadays concept and nowadays zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. But the point is that the water, since ages, has always designed the surroundings and the environments. This is in the, as we called it, captiva way, so where the water is very clearly human designed. This is in a more natural way, very organic and very inserted in the landscape, even with the presence of other pieces of art and statue collections. And also water is important because water brings life, and so even the vegetation can get importance thanks to the water. The ones that I'm showing you are just some of the infinite examples of the uses of water in relationship with architecture. And basically, this is what we ask you to do when you're going to be into the during the Premio Piranesi. Sorry for my voice and coughing, but I don't know why now it's getting worse and worse. Okay. Now, getting into a closer view of some of what you have to do during the Premio Piranesi, I'm going to show you two projects that can be kept as paradigms of what can be done and how you can approach the project when you're going to attend Premio Piranesi. Those are two examples, pretty famous, that are completely different one to each other. The first example is a light and reversible musealization designed by João Luís Carrillo da Graça in Lisbon. And this is something very reversible, very abstract, and very superintendencies like. I mean, it's something that can be done pretty easily in most of the archaeological sites. The second example is the reconstruction of the Roman theater of Sagunto over its ruins. So this is a project not reversible, or at least not reversible in the easiest way, that has to do with the reconstruction of a volume to display and to show the people how this building used to appear. Very, very different one to each other. The two proposed examples constitute totally opposite vision of the relationship between architecture and archaeology, although they exhibit the same principle of composition, that of the extrusion of ancient wall traces. The first one behaves like a ghost that hovers on the ruin without touching them, but without renouncing to make volumetric and typological plot. The second one behaves as if there had never been any discontinuity between the ancient architecture and its reconstruction, which draws strength and substance by giving meaning to the ancient foundation walls. So, the first one is a project that works with diversity, discontinuity with archaeology. The second one is a project that works in straight continuity with archaeology. So the first one is the musealization of the archaeological site of the castle of São Jorge in Lisbon by João Luís Carrillo da Graça. This is Lisbon, and the yellow one is the area where our project is going to insist. The project I'm going to show you is a very peculiar area, pretty close to the castle of São Jorge in Lisbona. And this area is was an archaeological one, presenting this state of situation before the intervention. Basically, you could have seen at that time those ruins, very chaotic, not visitable, not accessible by disabled people, and even the covering of the different areas were somehow random and inconsistent. The construction of the musealization of the archaeological area of Praça Nova on the castle of São Jorge entrusted to João Luís Carrillo da Graça downstream of a competition is interesting in many aspects that have to do with accessibility to the site and with accessibility to knowledge. The project themes are basically two: the management of archaeological levels and the reconstruction of an Islamic domus. These two themes are architecturally expressed with two different force materials and different colors, didactically distinguishable. The arrangement of the area and the management of the levels is in red core 10, and the reconstruction is phantasmatically in white nav aqua panel. Here you can see, and you can have a look and appreciate the archaeological ruin map. And the first action that Carrillo decided to produce is the definition of a boundary. So to let the people understand what is inside and what is outside the archaeological areas. He decided to define this boundary by this core 10 wall. This is a technical drawing overimposed on a photograph that shows you the technological element. But what we are more interested in is the fact that João decided to define the boundaries of the area by a very sharp and neat element that gives the visitor the understanding of what is outside and what is inside. And also the fact that the inside part of the intervention is in a lower level compared to the outside part. Because when you enter an archaeological site, you usually go down, because archaeology is something that is on a deeper level. Here you can see some of the intervention. So this curtain wall defining the area, and also the fact that the pavement of the archaeological area has been flattened, so the people now can use it and assess it very easily and with no problems of accessibility. This is the relationship of the intervention with the surrounding. Other overall area, you can see a person standing in the middle of the archaeological area, and you can appreciate the fact that when you are inside the archaeological area, the boundary walls is higher than you, so you can't have a straight view relationship with the exterior. Some picture that shows you the connection. Oh, sorry. And those are some of the boxes preserving and protecting the Iron Age elements that has been found inside the archaeological area. But the second main intervention, the one I already told you and anticipated before, is the reconstruction of the Islamic Domus from the 11th century. Basically, the main building insisting on this area was this Domus from the Islamic culture. This is an archaeological reconstruction of how the Domus would have appeared in its original shape. So this is basically a pretty simple courtyard house, typical of the Mediterranean culture. And those are some of the models that, the mock-ups that Carrillo da Gracia used to propose his project and to study his project. Basically, he decided, as I anticipated, to extrude the main walls to recreate the walls of the houses, the missing walls of the houses, to give the people the understanding of the masses and of the volumes that used to insist in that area. And basically, this model, this maquette, represent mostly the final project from Carrillo, that in fact, you can see how similar they are, is a very abstract and very clean, sharp volume, white volume, with aqua panel elements covered by plasters that are standing over there, giving the visitor the understanding of the dimension and volumes of the former house, but obviously not telling the visitors a real reconstruction. This is an abstract reconstruction and just a chance to create museographical volumes that can be visited and then can host elements inside. This project is basically completely reversible. In fact, his structure is composed by metallic beams and pillars touching the ground only in 6 points, nothing else. So only 6 pillars touch the ground, so reducing the danger of wasting the archaeological remains in a very, very strong way. And this metallic skeleton is covered with the panels that redefine the skin of the building. And this is his final appearance. Somehow, these volumes recreates even the original width of the walls, and on the other hand, make the new building like floating in the air over the ruins. They never look like touching the ruins, but they look like floating and almost moving in the air. And here you can see the final reconstruction. On the right side, the curtain elements preserving the Iron Age discoveries, and on the left side, the abstract reconstruction of the Islamic house. Here, I don't know who has some chicken.
No, not chickens.
It's my seagulls, my pet
Ah!
seagulls.
Yeah, you are in Rome. You have seagulls.
No, you got it wrong. That was Romolo. That was Romolo singing.
Okay, I hope that the seagull is a good omen for us and for Piranesi for the next months. This is the final effect. Probably we can have lots of seagulls even in Lisbon, I guess. And this is the final effects of the reconstruction of the Islamic house that is accessible and visitable from the visitors. This is the rooftop that is designed in the way the light can enter, filtered by those wooden elements, not continuous, and can be clearly appreciate even from the outside level that is higher, as I told you. So you can have a look to the roof of the new intervention that became a kind of a fifth facade of the building. Here is a closer look to the roof, and this is the interior views of the domus. This is the courtyard, obviously. This is the courtyard during night, to emphasize even this floating effect of the new intervention. Carrillo decided to put lights underneath or inside his intervention to emphasize the relationship between new and old. Obviously, some pathways that help the visitors to appreciate better the archaeology. And this is a view of the area during the dawn, and the color of the light obviously become warmer and more oranges, and the building looks like floating even more in the surrounding. It's a very simple somehow intervention, but on the other hand, a very paradigmatic intervention as well. And is obviously contemporary architecture, because what I want to be clear of, because maybe I could have been misunderstood, is that when you come to the Prix Piranesi, you will learn from classical architecture, but you will design contemporary architecture. If there's a difference between two, actually, because this is something that can be debatable. The second intervention is the one from Giorgio Grassi about the restoration and rehabilitation of the Roman theater in Sagunto. This is a very, 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 very famous and debated intervention, because the reconstruction of the Roman theater of Sagunto is the most important architectural experience for archaeology in Europe since the anastylosis of Balanos in Athens and Munoz in Rome. Balanos in Athens is the intervention I already showed you before during my presentation. We can say that there is a first and an after Sagunto. So before Christ and after Christ for our Western culture, but we can also say before Sagunto and after Sagunto about the attitude of archaeology and architecture when it gets to reconstruction. Is an extremely controversial realization. It is based on the idea of typological restoration. Some have talked about typological anastylosis as a reconstruction starting from the ancient typology of the Roman theater. That is, on the principle that the typological specificity of the Roman theater cannot return other than a theater in the manner of the Romans. In this way, the entire scenic building and part of the cavea is reconstructed. The construction technique is that of sec masonry, with the concrete contained by exposed brick walls. But let's make it clearer. Oh, sorry, what have I done?
That's very clear.
Thank you. This is my daughter.
I know, she's very cute. Complimenti.
Guess who's the father? Because she's cute.
Well, that's hard to believe.
Bene, bene.
The plumber, maybe. Anyway. This is an aerial view of the Sagunto archaeological area, including both the theater and the castle. But we are going to talk about the theater in itself. Sagunto is a Spain city pretty close to Valencia, and in this photograph you can basically understand everything of what we are talking about. The bottom left picture represents the area before the Giorgio Grassi's interventions, and mostly what we could have appreciated after a kind of restoration we had in the beginning of the 20th century. The three top picture, instead, from left to right, present the building site during the reconstruction of the theater. Basically, the project consisted in the extrusion of the original walls to recreate the exact volumes and the scenery that you could have appreciated during the Roman period if you would have visited the theater of Sagunto. You can see on the top left the area completely naked, we could say, but only with the presence of some restoration that can be seen in the basis of this scenery. Then the area after the demolition of the fake restoration of the beginning of the 20th century, and then the building site with the project of Grassi. If you have a very close look, you can see that all the buildings that has been extruded retrace exactly the archaeological remains. So mostly, and I'm not entering too much some little defects or some problems that creates and the debate around this building. The idea is to extrude exactly the volume it was there before. Those are some of the drawings used by Giorgio Grassi to define the intervention, and actually the only one we can have. And this is the model. Even in this case, the maquette is pretty close to the final realization. You can clearly appreciate what is the archaeological remain, that part, and what is the new intervention. There's a lot of new intervention, actually, but the idea is to recreate a Roman theater as it was, where it was. So the people going in there nowadays can understand and appreciate how the theater used to look like for the Romans visitors. And this is the view and the relationship between the new intervention, honestly, pretty massive and strong, facing the city of Sagunto just behind it. I said that the intervention is massive and bulky somehow, but the point is that is exactly the dimension and the masses that we used to have formerly. Those are some view, and in the whole intervention we just have one element of anastylosis. That's that technique I told you before, that is these two columns reconstructed and rebuilt over here, redesigning the two orders that used to or decor the scene of the theater. The theater that has been thought as a valorization intervention, a musealization of the area to show, as I told you, the effective dimension, volumes, and shape of an ancient Roman theater, is also thought as a museum. In fact, you can use the scenery to display lots of remains found all over. On the other hand, the theater, actually, it is used as a theater nowadays, because from Giorgio Grassi's point of view, the typology of Roman theater admit only a reconstruction of a Roman theater. So its function can be kept exactly the same. Those are original photographs during the openings ceremony. And these are pictures taken by us during some of our visits to the area. You can see in this drawing how the philological reconstruction is pretty precise. So the scenery kept exactly the same height of the summa cavea area, and the internal space, it's a very defined interior space, it's clear and understandable, also because of the hearing needs that you have in a theater. Sorry again. In the right image, you can appreciate the limit defined by the archaeology and the new intervention. So you still keep a clear recognizability between the two, but at the same time, there's no solution in the shape and in the form of the intervention, because, as I told you more than once, the need was to reproduce a Roman theater. This is the reconstruction of the seats for the visitors. Even in this case, he decided not to reuse the entire seating area, just to show the relationship between old and new. And those are some of the views that you can have visiting the area. Is that important that people goes there to visit the theater despite no representation are on? Because basically it's a museum of itself and of the process of the musealization. Being honest, we can clearly say that this project is not removable. And this is one of the reasons why, probably the main reason why it has been that debated, that fighted. In fact, there's still a party over there that is against this reconstruction, and then they want to demolish it. Here you can see the relationship between the ruin and the architecture. Still some drawings showing you the anastylosis of the two orders and the photographs showing the realization. Here it is. And basically, those two, the one from Carrillo de Gracia and this one from Giorgio Grassi, are the main approach you can have, the main approaches you can have to insist on the ruins when you are going to attend the Premio Piranesi. Obviously, you won't be left alone during the Piranesi. You will be followed by tutors that will help you in understanding and taking your decision. But basically, those are the two main branches you can choose among for realizing your project. Sorry if I'm going that fast and I'm not giving pauses, but I don't want to bother you too much, and I want to close everything in half an hour more. So now I'm trying to entering some technical disposition of how we draw during the Piranesi Award, what we ask you for. Because the idea here is not to having only the best representation as possible, but the idea is to be more attainable as possible. In fact, we have academic tradition during the Piranesi Prize, and they are addressed to give to your drawings, to your expressive possibilities, the chance of being as much as realistic as possible. That is, doesn't mean that you're going to produce photorealistic renders, but it means that what you draw and what you represent is readable, understandable, and measurable. So the first idea is that your drawing should be vectorial. So everything should be measured. We don't want you to reproduce renders with Photoshop or that things that can't be controlled and checked by you and by the tutors, because intervening on those areas can't be too superficial. We need to be precise. Second, the drawings should be designed black and white, at least at the as a starting point. We use some etches, but not that many, and we use strongly the shadows to give to your drawings the depth we used to want in the drawing, to represent in the more clear way the ruins and the new intervention. After that, you can use photo insertion, but after you design your project in a vectorial way, so the project has been measured. You can use 3D models and still in a measurable way, but obviously when you design a 3D model, you have measures, and so you have to face yourself with the reality. And we don't give maps or texture, mapping or texture to the renders. This because the fact is connected, first of all, to the idea that if you are a very great renderer, it's okay. But usually, if you're not a professionist, the photorealistic renders are crap and don't help you in recreating a proper representation of the area. That's why in the two case history I showed you, the one from José Carrillo da Gracia in Lisbona and the one from Giorgio Grassi in Spain, I showed you mostly the maquette, the models. So since we don't have time during the Premio Piranesi in a couple of weeks to recreate a proper model, physical model, you can recreate a model that would be 3D with your computer, but without giving too many texture, because this won't help you in producing a proper and understandable project. It is not allowed the use of Photoshop while designing. What does it mean? Photoshop is a software that was not born to design, was born to draw. So you have to design the project without using Photoshop, as I already told you. But afterward, while you are producing your board, your slides, your renders, and so on, you can use Photoshop on your images to refine the quality of the representation. Obviously, for the same reason that I told you about the renders, it is allowed the use of the freehand drawing, but only if you are a good drawer. Because if the freehand drawings are crap, that won't help you in representing the project. They will go against your exposition and your representation. Obviously, they can use during the desk crease, but it's more difficult to use them for the final presentation, because if they are not good, the people will judge them more from the artistic quality than not from the conceptual quality. This is something that you will always face in the future. Those basically are few rules that we use, but obviously your tutors will guide you into these processes. So don't worry if you don't remember, but it's just to show you the overall idea that lies behind our way of working. That is the one of creating projects that can be understood, measured, compared to other. We don't like that much, we don't like at all, sorry, the new tendencies of designing renders starting from Photoshop or just manipulating images too freely. Sorry if these look like being a bit reactionary, but that's the way we would like you to form yourself when you
Francesco.
are. Yes, please.
Scusa, if I could just add something to what you just said, I think it's very important that all the students understand that the idea behind this is a kind of thinking in materials that need dimensions, that need joints, so that the lines that we're asking for, the black and white drawings, are nothing more than joints in materials. If they think of that in terms of design, that is, I design with materials being brought to the site, being manipulated at the site, and finally constructing my finished project. I think if they have that attitude right at the beginning, that this way of drawing will actually come naturally. It will actually, sort of present itself to them as the only way you can actually present architecture, with measured drawings and every line being a joint in materials.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Romolo.
Yeah.
You've been definitely clearer.
No, va benissimo. Good.
Okay. Those are some examples of former drawings by our masters that we took our ideas from. This is the representation of the Acropolis of Pergamo. You can see everything is black and white and everything is clear, measurables, and starts from a real survey. This is the plan of the same area, but this is just a survey of the archaeology nowadays. This is an hypothetical reconstruction. Another amazing drawing. Now I'm going to show you just some example of how a technical design could also be artistical. All of those drawings were designed by hand, but obviously you can achieve the exactly same results using AutoCAD or any vectorial program. Look at this. A great reconstruction of the Pergamon altar, plan of the ruins, and so on. I'm not going to use too much time for that. Obviously, if you can sketch this way, your sketches are more than welcome. But this is some of the final thesis production we had and we presented. And as you can really appreciate, this is contemporary architecture represented just using vectorial elements without colors, without texturing. But the idea that lies behind this architecture is absolutely clear, not misunderstandable. You can't be misguided by those. This is probably you can recognize the Colosseum and the rest of the Via dei Fori Imperiali. No, not Via, the
Via Sacra.
Yeah, Via Sacra in
San Francesca Romana.
Yeah. Those are some drawings. This one is Sagunto again, and this one, the Museum Island in Berlin. This is the Pergamon Museum, the Bode Museum, Alte Nationalgalerie, Neues Museum, and Altes Museum. Those are some drawings that I already showed you. Here, the texturing is very simple and realized just using adding colors, but the texture is pretty clear and understandable the same. Again, some drawings of Sagunto. Those are the kind of drawings we would like you to produce. Those are by hands, designed by Nunzio Dego, just using ink and Pantone. I don't know how to. We used to call them Pantones or markers.
Yeah, Pantone.
Yeah, Pantone. Yeah. Same drawings for the Museum Island in Berlin. Ink and Pantone. This is the interior space of the Neues Museum. Shadows and 2D representation. Then, through the years, we also, this is a project realized during one of the Piranesi Award. After you produced your project in 2D dimension and measurable dimension, you can have a photo insertion, and you can use Photoshop, or you can use all the trick you have. But after that, your project has been analyzed and checked. Here you can see some ideas, some situation. These are projects realized on the Pretorio. And this is a project not in Villa Adriana, but a project that we really, part of the project in itself, but we really love the representation system. You should understand that those renders are from 2004, so 17 years ago. This is in Sicily, but as you can easily understand, this representation is it is pretty similar to take a photograph of a model, nothing more, nothing less. Here you can clearly understand the project. You can clearly appreciate the difference between archaeology and new intervention. And everything is understandable, measurable. Is a model obtained with a 3D. Here they are. Those are renders produced by Filippo Fantini, as I told you, in 2004. Still exactly what we would like you to have. Also because to have artistic outputs, it took more than 2 weeks. Because at the end of the day, when you attend the Premio Piranesi, you not even have 2 weeks, because you arrive, you get to know the other groups, you get to know the people, you compose your groups. So for the first 2 days, you don't work. Then you submit your final project 3 days before the ending of the Premio Piranesi, because after you submitted, you have the presentation. After your presentation, the day after, you have the award ceremony. So basically, at the end of the day, you will have 8-9 days.
One week.
Yeah, 1 week or roughly that time. So you don't have time to refine your renders. That's why we also create a protocol of how to produce similar views, similar renderings, applying this protocol to some easy command of Photoshop, of other softwares, and you can see which kind of drawings we ask the students to produce during the Premio Piranesi. Those are views produced by some of your predecessors before, in the past edition of Premio Piranesi. Those are the kind of project we ask you for. Pavilions, insisting on the archaeological ruins with the musealization needs, and with the presence of the elements that design your architecture, possibly with the presence of water, like this one. Galleries and pavilions, hosting architecture, the using of light, this is very important, the presence of the shadows, the way that the surrounding let the sun kiss your architectures. Here you can even appreciate the way they decided to represent the sky with the using of an ancient engraving, probably from Piranesi itself, facing your new architecture. This is the interior of one of the pavilions designed by students like you. Other views of the interiors. And don't worry, we're going to help you in this, and we're going to give you all the protocols needed to obtain those results. Okay, then, last but not least, Control L, the last thing that is about visual and communication design. When you come to the Premio Piranesi, you will face 3 projects. One is the one I told you already about. It is pavilion insisting on the archaeological areas. Water pavilion, mostly. The second one is a project about the refunctionality of the buffer zone all around Villa Adriana. So it's a more a landscape design, taking into account that nowhere land that is around Villa Adriana and that is usually around all the UNESCO sites in the entire world that usually are frozen because of UNESCO's request, but that should be redesigned and somehow rethought to not making them turning into a no one's land. And this is the second project, a landscape one. But there's also a third project that has to do with visual and communication design. In fact, basically, we ask you to redesign a logo of the area and a pictogram of the area. Because most of the archaeological sites all over the world didn't look after those communication needs. And that's why they are not recognizable, they are not sellable, they're not easy to have their own market. They can't be diffused even over the net or over the usual institutional channels. So we start with a creative act that is the creation of a graphic symbol combined with a distinctive name. The logo is the name, readable and pronounceable, related to an institution, a company, or an organization. And it is graphically represented by a name or an acronym for the use of a well-defined lettering. A pictogram is the symbolic part of a brand, the unreadable and unmistakable emblem that refers to the enterprise through a relationship of visual associative kind. The pictogram portrays graphically the object represented. Pictograms are divided into ideograms, abstract sign, and iconographic, similar sign. The joint of logo and pictogram produce the brand. That is how to communicate verbally and visually the brand in itself. And so the identity of an organization or an institution, like in the case of Villa Adriana. Let's have a look to some of them. Mostly not related to archaeological area, but some of them related to cultural institution. Here we have the Tate Modern. You probably know about it. The museum in London. We have the Louvre. We have Electa, that is a publishing company, mostly about arts and architecture. And even Zetema, that is an association that organized and managed all the cultural institutions in Rome. Here we can have the former and the new logo of the British Museum. Became into that. This is the logo and the pictogram, both joined. This is the logo of the Victorian and Albert Museum, again in London. And how this logo has been used to make some adverts of exhibition or publication, and or even the shops that sells their own products. This is the MoMA, very famous logo and pictogram, famous and very clear and understandable and recognizable. This is the modern logo of the Tate Modern, that can change depending of different situation and exhibitions. Change the color, change the situation, and change about the fact that the Tate is an institution that is diffused. We have the Tate Britain that is in Trafalgar Square, but we also have the Tate Modern that is in the old electric central over the Thames. We have the Tate in St. Ives. We have the Tate in Liverpool. So each of them have different color that define one of the site of the institution. This is a pictogram representing the Tate Modern and the new intervention from Herzog de Meuron. And this is the web page of the Louvre. When you get to this web page, you can start from the start, recognize where you are, and you can understand exactly how to move and to surf into the web. This is the web page of the MoMA, something you have to design and to think during the Piranesi world. This is the website of the Triennale of Milan, another very important museum. But let's have a look to the Nike logo and pictogram. In the 1971, the logo and the pictogram were overlapped one to each other. Then in 1978, the lettering changed and just the swoosh remained the same, and the position of the lettering also changed. In 1985, logo and the swoosh, they were framed by a square, and nowadays Nike as a logo doesn't appear any longer, but we just keep the swoosh. This is the changes that the logo and the pictogram of Audi cars developed through the decades. But also about Macintosh and the Apple computer. The first logo was very ancient-like, if you want, and the current one is just a byte and Apple, without even the name Apple computer on it. So the logo disappeared. Amazon, they changed from the first triangle reminding the aim of Amazon and a road in the middle of the A, and now instead we have the entire name of the website with an arrow that symbolize a smile. This is the development of the Volkswagen logo, sorry, pictogram. And basically, this is what we ask you to do during Premio Piranesi. So now, I finished with my PDF presentation. Let me open back the, okay, and I can come to life, back. Now some words, little words to close everything about the logistic that obviously we interest more the students, not from the Pantheon Institute, that probably will arrange themselves in their own way, but for some reason, maybe in other situations can be interesting for both. As I told you, you will work in groups. Those groups will be composed generally by 5 to 7 people. We won't go in other solution. Usually we ask each person to join 1 or 2 friends, so we can have little groups of 2, 3 people that can be composed together to create the final group of 5, 7 people. So we can have 2 students from China, 2 students from Milan, and 2 students from Napoli, or different situation and different possibility of mixing the participants. You will be followed by a group of tutors that will look after you all the time, every day, 24/7, basically, apart the lunch, dinner time, and we sleep a bit during the night. And apart from the student from the Pantheon that will have their own places where they can work and where they can sleep, for the others, we usually arrange the solution of being hosted into bed and breakfast, little villas, or a hotel. Actually, at the moment, all the bed and breakfast and little villas have been occupied because the requests from the students are very high. So we finished all those situations. So for whom that want to take part in Premio Piranesi, we can offer the location in the hotel. That is basically the main location with the biggest number of students taking part. We are using that hotels since 5 or 6 years. So we know exactly the organization, we know how to behave, and the groups that works in the hotels can not only sleep there and have their lunch and organize themselves in that way, but they also can work over there to reduce to the minimum the movement and the possibility of interfere with other people because of the COVID restriction. The tutors will be the ones that will move from their own places to your own situation to give you the reviews you need. What else? Okay, yeah, the accommodation in the hotels cost 25 euros a day. And what else? The rooms host 3 or 4 people, depending on the request. And obviously, all of you should follow some COVID protocols we ask you for. So you should come after having a tampon, a fast tampon, not more than 48 hours before the coming to the Premio Piranesi. During the period of working, you should keep at least 1 meter distances, using of the mask all the time, and so on. But don't worry, we will be there chasing after you and asking you to take care of yourself. And also every morning when we start with the revision, we have to check your temperature to check if you've got flu or not. Hopefully the situation in late August will be even easier than now, but we obviously can't afford to have disease or pandemic situation during the Premio Piranesi. So we have to keep all the protocols we need to be safe as much as possible. So after that, since I guess that there won't be any question because only Ki Wang is attending this presentation, I guess there are no questions. Ciao, Ki.
Ciao. Appreciate your patience for this tutorial. And
No,
it's
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, and thank you, all professors. And so I just have one question related with the tutorial when we are going to Rome, because from the list, I think there's not so many foreign students. So I just wondering if the tutorial will be in English or in Italian,
Both.
and we
Will
don't
be
want to
both.
make trouble for that, like too much work. So,
Last year, when we get to the Piranesi, there will be one day, one morning mostly, with some lectures, and those lectures will be in Italian or both in Italian and in English. Obviously, since the lectures will be held online, the people that speak English will connect with the room in English, the others with the room in Italian. Probably I will be the one in making the English session, and the Professor Cagliari or someone else, if he's okay with his health, will keep the Italian session. So for that, you shouldn't be scared. The revision will be held in both languages. Obviously, when you are in mixed groups, sometimes you speak in Italian, sometimes you speak in English, but don't worry about comprehension. Nobody never complained about that. You will be following in the lecture in the language you prefer. Obviously, not in Chinese because we don't speak Chinese.
no problem. But also, how many courses we will have, like tutorial courses, or is just for the projects? Do we have?
No, it's just one day with courses and with lectures. The rest is
Projects.
work on the project every day with your tutors, and mostly the revision will be kind of lectures, because obviously for you this kind of intervention is completely new. So every input we give you will be explained and described as a kind of a lecture somehow, because obviously if not you can't process. But mostly the day of lecture is one, probably the second on the third or the third day. We didn't finish the calendar yet.
Okay, clear. Thank you a lot.
You're welcome, and for you and for all the others that will have a look to this presentation that is recorded, for any kind of the information, mostly about the accommodation and the logistic problem, you can write an email to premio.piranesi@gmail.com. That is PRIANESI@gmail.com. I'm not going to spell it because, wow, spelling something without reading something is too difficult for me.
In English.
I'm a man, so I'm just a binary 0101, so not that much in that.
Francesco, if I could say one more thing for the
Absolutely.
American students that will be participating as part of our general Pantheon Institute orientation, which will happen on the 20th, that's the day after arrival. We will, as part of the academic orientation, give another presentation of the Premio Piranesi in its logistical details, let's say, for the American students. So they can look forward to, if they have any questions that aren't being answered just yet, we can handle many of those during that weekend of orientation as soon as they arrive and before the beginning of the Premio. Tutto lì.
Okay.
Good. David, do you want to say anything? You want to add anything?
Well, no, not really. You guys said most important things. I think all we have to do is wait for the show to begin, and I'm sure it's going to be a very intense and very meaningful experience for every student involved. I mean, we will try to do our best as usual.
Yeah. Also, I think much is going to depend on what happens with COVID restrictions between now and then, because we may be able to, participate more, invite the students down to our studio, etc.
The trend,
if the
the trend
restrictions
is
are light.
positive. The
Yeah.
trend is positive. So,
Yeah.
So we'll have
we are
some
pretty
options,
confident.
perhaps.
Yeah, we are pretty confident that by the end of August, or yes, end of August, things should be a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bene.
We all hope so. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Va bene.
if everything has been said, I would stop the recording.
Bene.
And that's it. Interrompe registrazione.